Good afternoon. Just taking an opportunity to give our perspective before we go into the leaders' meeting shortly at 3 o'clock to get the latest update in terms of COVID-19. From our perspective, some of the issues that we will be raising, obviously the backlog in testing is causing very significant concern out there. That's what we've picked up over the last number of days, and anxiety. And I think more fundamentally, it impairs the data we have in relation to the virus itself and where it's at within the Republic, with the time lag in terms of the results coming in and the number of people delayed. So that obviously is a factor in terms of determining best approaches and best practice in terms of the issue itself. We've also picked up a lot of anxiety about PPE, protective personal equipment and clothing. Many people contacting us in relation to that. We know that the HSE has put in significant orders, but there needs to be, I think, straight up transparency and honesty with staff and with people across the country in relation to that issue, because there is a lot of concern out there. Thirdly, I think that there should be, at this stage, greater transparency where outbreaks happen and where clusters happen. Because when rumour develops, it's, in my view, more counterproductive to good behaviour, as opposed to actually stating it as it is. And I'm aware of some areas where people have contacted me about outbreaks in a particular institution or particular centres, and that is causing a lot of concern, and it's something I'll be asking for greater transparency so that people are more aware of the issues. We do need more severe restrictions in addition to what we currently have. I would like to say, first of all, I think that most people in the country that I've observed have been adhering to the guidelines that have been issued by the public health officials and by NIFET. Many of the cities, as we know, there are very few people on the streets. That said, we've evidence of other gatherings in terms of at resorts or elsewhere, or queuing for chips and so on like that, large numbers. So I think severer restrictions are required in terms of public gatherings. And it's all about protecting our senior citizens, protecting people with underlying conditions. So whatever it takes to protect those who are most vulnerable to this virus, then that has to be taken, subject to the public health advice that we will be receiving later, and indeed that the government receives on an ongoing basis from the Chief Medical Officer and his team and the committee that he works with. But I've no doubt that particularly on public gatherings, greater restrictions are required, and we need to do everything we possibly can to protect the over 65s and to protect those with underlying conditions. On the economic front, we're very clear that a much more substantive, comprehensive package is required, similar to what other countries have been doing in Denmark, the UK and elsewhere. Substantive supports for employees, people who've been laid off in particular sectors, in line with other countries, but also maintaining the link between the worker and the enterprise. Because I think that is the key, so that the enterprise, when this is over, can restart as quickly as possible. And for that to happen, there will have to be softer loans, interest-free loans and working capital supports, so that companies can restart quickly in the aftermath of the worst impact of this particular crisis. And that sort of connection, if you like, between worker and employer is essential in this regard, and we've read quite a number of reports from various bodies and research which is suggesting that is the best optimal way to deal with a crisis of this kind, which is quite unique, and it will demand very significant resources from the Exchequer over the next 6 months in particular. But in our view, it's probably the most effective in terms of guaranteeing both restarting the economy, but also getting some of that money back later on when that happens. So we'll take any questions that people have.
Micheál, you say you want to introduce more severe restrictions for public gatherings. What form would they take?
Well, I think certainly where you have large numbers gathering, for example, at beaches or at particular well-known resorts, that should stop.
Close the beaches and resorts?
Well, I think there's other mechanisms perhaps that could be deployed to make sure that people don't gather and that people keep their physical distance. And I think it's fair to say that some of the concepts like social distancing are new concepts that haven't really, if you like, that people weren't familiar with. So I think it's important to double down in terms of the messaging. But I heard a GP this morning, I think used a more accurate phrase, physical distancing from people. And I think that is, in my view, the approach to take. I think confining everybody to their homes, I think is, in my view, problematic in itself and needs to be thought through. Whatever restrictions are introduced need to be thought through. The full consequences of them need to be thought through and not just obviously announced on the hoof. And therefore we will take cognizance of the public health advice that will be coming in relation to that.
On the issue of clusters and more transparency around it, are you saying that other countries, they're more specific about the areas or the towns? Are you calling for that sort of information to be given out each day?
I am actually. I think it would create greater awareness. It would also create a sense of we're all in this together. I mean, there has been some criticism over the weekend about how some people are carrying on as normal. A small percentage, but nonetheless that has been happening. And therefore I think if it became more localized and more, I think it would help awareness, but also I think it would help people to protect and to take steps to be careful. I got the argument early on, but now I think we're having higher numbers tested. We'll have higher numbers who will be symptomatic. So I think if you look at Singapore, if you look at Taiwan, if you look at other countries, they have been doing this consistently, and people actually in those countries welcome it, and it doesn't cause any stigma, but it just allows people to be more aware and to take more self-protection in relation to it.
Just with the financial supports, have you got a figure in mind what you think is necessary? And second, what's important before you park your trucks there, where stands that process?
Well, 2 points there. First of all, I think the 80%, 75 to 80% of an employee is probably where we should be at. That's what Denmark is doing, the UK, other countries to a lesser or greater degree. But also I think the key is to link that to the employer, so that the workforce, if you like, is stood down, not made redundant. I think that's important in terms of getting an enterprise going again. Today won't be part of the formation of government. There will be meetings this week in relation to that, and there will be an exchange of papers between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in relation to that this week. So that's towards the middle of the week when that will occur. Today is firmly about COVID-19. I can't at this stage, and I think the emphasis and the focus, quite rightly, is on COVID-19 and dealing with that. And all of us are, as public representatives, are taking a lot of calls from the public, from the doctors, from the medical community, who I must say I think have been very innovative in their approach to this. Have kept coming forward with solutions and ideas. And it's been a very positive engagement with the medical community. They're not just ringing up, giving out or complaining, they're ringing up saying, here's what we could do, here's what we should do, and can you feed that in? And many people coming forward with positive, helpful and constructive ideas that we're feeding into the central process, into the HSE and into the public health and into the ministers and so on.
Micheál, are you open to the prospect of the Taoiseach remaining in situ, Leo Varadkar remaining as Taoiseach, and Simon Harris as Health Minister, and other ministers who are to the fore of dealing with this crisis, to remain so if there is a government formed with Fine Gael in the coming weeks?
So as I said, we will be entering those discussions this week, and as far as we're concerned, I've already had discussions with the Taoiseach on this some weeks back. We had clear understandings in terms of how that would develop, but obviously the talks will commence, and for me, right now, COVID-19 is the key issue, and that's where it's at.
What's your understanding?
Well, dús bara time of over níos mó sin chur bhaim ó heh an bobbal, caithmid níos mó dhéanamh chun daoine sinsere níos mó cara hortdóibh agus go háirithe na daoine atá ag balú las mó chippers agus mar sin sin stoppe agus mar aon le sin daoine atá ag balú sno resorts cosúla le hinsnú áit na cosúla sin caiigse caithmid sin stoppe chomá agus tá sé ar gomas sinna dhéanamh Can be níos saléire ó madra leis cadatáid tarlú I ngachéan cúnta ó heh clusters agus daoine ina bhfuil an COVID lob. Can mí sinna ailsiú beidir níos saléire na mátá ar siúil fi láthair. Tá daoine bortha faoin aspa PPE ag an bouta seo áitna éagsúlagus tá siad ag tacht chuing ag gearán faoi sin agus mar aon le sin ó heh an testing tá daoine bortha go bhfuil sé ag tugann an méadama satá sé agus go bhfuil díortha an I sin dhéanamh níos tapúla.
Is there a problem with the incoming Shannon Bihal in terms of that there'll be no teaching till 0.11 centres? Could that cause an administrative problem, or if there was new legislation required, or what are the...
It may very well. I think our sense is it will cause difficulties. And obviously, my understanding is government will be bringing forward legislation on Thursday to add to that which we brought in last week. But after that, then the constitution position is such that I think that there will be difficulties created in terms of having a similar type exercise, for example, after the Shannon election is complete. Sorry.
Just to go back to your point of information, do you think are we weeks away or are we months away from the government? How much of a deal is being done between?
Well, I mean, there's very little in terms of the programme for government. I mean, I've been fairly straight about this from the very beginning. After the general election, I stated what I felt was the optimal position. Obviously, Fine Gael they said they were waiting and waiting. They wanted to go into opposition and so on like that. They wanted to lead the opposition, and then they had a parliamentary party. COVID-19 gathered greater intensity, to be fair, and obviously has drawn a lot of human resources and focus from ministers and from everybody else. So there will be further discussions this week in the exchange of papers. We'll take it from there. But I can't give you a timeline.
On your issue of more regional information throughout the country about where clusters may be, would that lead to perhaps regionally exclusive restrictions that if there's a cluster in the place that people in those regions could lead to lockdowns in particular geographical areas?
Well, not so much lockdowns, but it could change behaviour in a good way. Just people would be a bit more conscious of the situation in their locality and then would behave accordingly. And I think that's important. But also in terms of the staff in a given institution, in terms of people who are visiting that institution, they need to know. And they need to be made aware of the scale of something or not. Because I'm aware of a situation, where there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of anxiety, a lot of rumour mongering around, but a lack of transparency in relation to it.
I mean, I'll just on the issue of the banks also.
Will that actually perhaps hasten the pace of government formation talks if the state is in a situation where they have to bring in new legislation in relation to things like the financial package, and yet any decision that comes through the bureaucracy because the way the Shannon will be may be open to question in the courts. Do you think it will force the time?
It may very well concentrate the minds of everybody because the scale of the economic intervention will be enormous. Let's be honest, the current situation is not ideal from an accountability perspective and in terms of the future, because whatever happens now will have a significant impact on the next number of years as well. So I think that may very well concentrate the minds in terms of progressing the talks and the discussions around the formation of a new government. But I think understandably from the health perspective, the immediate focus has to be on COVID-19 and its impact on the public out there and trying to deal with the issues that, to be fair, the HSE and the Chief Executive Officer, Paul Reid, I think have been working extremely hard to deal with, given the unprecedented nature of it. We see what's happening in other countries as well. And I think we have to be very mindful of that.
Michal, just on the issue of the bank, Pascal Donoghue, there's some criticisms of today about the announcement and the supports that customers were getting. A lot of people are saying they're not actually coming to fruition today, that banks actually aren't playing ball with their customers. Do you think that was sort of promises that were made last week to them, or what's your reaction to it?
Well, we have no sense that there are false promises, but they should be implemented to the letter. In fact, they will have to go further, in our view. And in our to companies. There are also other mechanisms that you might have read some reports today around deferrals of, VAT, deferrals of perhaps commercial property tax in some cases, to help companies weather the storm. And there's a whole range of mechanisms that are available to government and to agencies to enable the small companies in particular to weather the storm. That's what we're talking about here. They're viable companies. These are viable companies, but they've been knocked out by an unprecedented public health disaster. So it stands to reason that with the right supports, they can become healthy, viable companies in the aftermath of this. And remember, if you look at the hospitality sector, its impact on the regions in terms of employment is quite dramatic. It's one of those sectors that rural Ireland and the regions depend on so much in terms of jobs and in terms of added investment. So it really is worth our while to make sure that we can sustain these companies for the long term, and that means very wise, generous and strong targeted intervention right now to enable that to happen. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Micheál.
Thank you.